I think we should get rolling, Kelly.
Yeah, it looks like we're steady. All right, we will open the meeting, calling the meeting to order, and we will stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Log behind.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our first order of business is to approve last week's minutes of July 29th. If I can have a motion to do so.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
No.
I thought they were very concise and appropriate, so that was great. Okay, all in favor. Julia?
Aye.
Peter?
Aye.
Matt?
Aye.
Shannon?
Aye.
And Kelly? Aye. All right, our discussion items are for back to school planning. There are 3 items: changes to the calendar, continued discussion of learning models, and updates on kindergarten, preschool, extended day, and Magic Dragon.
So, Kelly, we're not necessarily going to take them in the exact order, so just kind of bear with us as we kind of navigate through. I'm going to kick off just with 5 slides with some just a few kind of random updates, similar to what I did last week, and then the core of the presentation is going to be with our building principals. So does that sound okay?
Yeah. And do you want us to hold questions or ask as we go?
Yeah, I want to say this. I thank you for prompting me. So as far as the school committee is concerned, you're welcome to ask questions, clarifying or otherwise during the presentation. We are going to ask the attendees to the meeting to hold off if they could using the Q&A feature. We're not going to be able to answer the Q&A throughout the meeting. We just can't, we don't have, it's hard to kind of keep track of the meeting and try to answer questions. So, so we won't be answering those kind of in real time. We'll get to those for the public comment period. But as far as the committee goes, please feel free to weigh in if you want.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I'm just going to share my screen here for. Can you're all seeing my screen?
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, so again, these are sort of some sort of random updates, and then I'll get kind of to some big stuff in a moment. Few updates sort of since last week. I just want to update you. So today, literally probably less than 3 hours ago, the Department of Education extended the deadline for final plan submissions to next Friday, August 14th. It was supposed to be Monday, August 10th. We're still, moving forward, trying to get our plans finalized by Monday. We're close, but it's a pretty big exercise to put it all together in one document. But I just wanted to let you know that we might not be submitting it on Monday. And again, that notice was given to us just this afternoon. Just again, some random things that's happened since last week. I feel like we were just here, but I thought this is important to mention. On Monday evening, Danielle, myself, Shannon, and I forget, Matt, I believe, participated in what I call the medical roundtable discussion. We invited 5 local doctors, all Duxbury residents, most of them parents, to come in we held a virtual meeting. But we presented our draft plans to them and really just wanted to hear their opinions, their professional opinions on kind of where we were. And we kind of brainstormed, some different ideas. And I have to say, it was extremely helpful to me. We had a pediatrician, we had a primary care physician, we had an infectious disease specialist. And so I just found it very informative. And I thought it was really important to get some expert opinion And as a bonus, some expert opinion from people who have a vested interest in the Duxbury Public Schools. So to me, that was a differentiator. So I thought that was really helpful. And anyway, and Shannon can certainly share any information about that if she wants later, but I just want to let you know we had that meeting. We do continue to have dialogue with the Duxbury Teachers Association. We actually began formal negotiations with the DTA this week because we need to develop a memorandum of agreement, you know, as we move forward with these plans. I just want to kind of put an exclamation point on this bullet and say we have a tremendous relationship with the DTA. We've been collaborating all summer, but until their membership ratifies or approves our plans, they're still in draft form. So it is their right to be able to impact bargain because it's a significant change in working conditions for them. And so until they ratify, we have to consider these plans a draft. Okay, I just wanted to make that point. Moving on, just for your information, we held an all-staff meeting last Friday. We had over 300 participants. We just shared our plans with them on the heels of last week's school committee, and had a great discussion and great Q&A with our staff. And then as a follow-up to that, principals held town hall style meetings with their individual faculties and staff. I believe it was Tuesday, maybe those meetings happened. So a lot has happened since we met last, and I just wanted to give you an update on that. Any questions on those things?
How will who's going to speak to the roundtable medical discussion? Is that Shannon going to speak to that?
I mean, she's shaking her head no. I mean, I don't know that there's much to say other than, and Shannon, please, and Matt, please correct me if you don't have the same interpretation. I believe that that they were very comfortable with the plans as we presented them, as far as getting back to school in some fashion. So a hybrid, or we didn't really talk at length about a full in-person return, but certainly a hybrid model with the significant safety accommodations that we're having to make. But I think they were very comfortable with that idea. And I think that's the best way I can summarize it. Shannon, Matt, do you have anything?
Yeah, no, I think they were. I think they had some good, they pointed out some areas where we still need to tweak some things, which I think was helpful. But, you know, I agree with that.
Yep.
Yeah, that was my interpretation of the meeting too. I mean, we talked pretty specifically on how things would be set up in terms of social distancing and how lunches would be held, and they just had a lot of informative questions and some advice and some comments based on those little details that I think are going to help us refine what the overall plan is. So it was a very helpful meeting.
I don't want to put, I don't overstate this, but to me, masks, people wearing masks was the game changer for us to be able to return to school. You know, they said that is, and even in their world, right, seeing patients, the fact that our students and staff will have masks on allow us to even have that conversation about getting them back to school safely. So I thought it was really interesting and really helpful. And if anybody's listening who participated, thank you so much for your time. It was really enlightening and very informative. So, okay.
Thank you.
So moving on, and I'm going to give you kind of before we turn it over to the principals, I'm going to kind of give you the punchline at the beginning, because I'm sure people are anxious. But we are tonight asking the school committee to approve a hybrid model to start the school year. And I think it's important to say to start the school year. It's a very fluid situation. It's very likely that we could end up in a fully remote model. It's also likely, I shouldn't say likely, but certainly possible that we can revert to a full in-person model at some point if the data changes, and and we all feel comfortable that's an option. But tonight we are asking you to approve the hybrid model. I want to say a few things about that though, because I mean, there's a lot of opinions about this. I would say 50-50 is a safe way to describe people's opinions on this, nationally, statewide, and certainly locally. And I want to say a few things about it. My first bullet, I think, is the most important, is that regardless of any safety precautions that we put in place, and regardless of our commitment to doing so, we cannot reduce the risk of this virus's transmission to zero. We can't. And if anybody claims we can, they're not paying attention and they're not listening to medical professionals. So we're doing everything in our power to bring students and staff back safely, but to suggest that we can reduce the risk to zero is simply not realistic. As I say here, common sense dictates that some risk does remain even with maximum adherence to these safety regulations, especially if our local transmission increases. That being said though, as an educator, I think it's incumbent upon us to balance the risks of the virus's transmission and infection with other significant risks. And in particular, we cannot discount the implications of not having children in school. Schools play, as I say here, an absolute vital role in our society. And it's our obligation, in my opinion, to find creative solutions and safe solutions to get our students back in school. You know, everything from learning loss when students aren't in school to, very importantly, the impact of students' social and emotional well-being, to students with nutritional insecurity, lack of access to the essential services that we provide, whether it's special education, speech and language, guidance counselors. Also the role that we play, you know, not having kids in school impacts some families' ability to hold a job or to have adequate childcare for their students. So this is a risk mitigation exercise. And I don't know how else to say that. So I know there's a lot of strong opinions about coming back to school, but our goal should be to get students back in schools where they belong. It's going to be a long road, but I think that has to be our ultimate goal. And so, you know, I don't want to belabor that point, but I just think it's really important to state. Before we begin kind of the bulk of this presentation here, I just want to say a few sort of make a few editorial comments. I really do believe that our plans are very thoughtful and very comprehensive, and I can assure you they're in line with every single school district in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And in fact, they have to be. Our plans have to get approved by the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, and I fully expect them to. I also want to say we are doing what we can reasonably under these circumstances. And very importantly, we're doing everything we can knowing that we need to provide equitable access to education for all Duxbury students. Not everybody has the same opportunities in this community, and equity and access are a huge issue for us. There's no blueprint or roadmap for educating the students. We are still in the middle of a global pandemic. And not to be cliche, but uncertainty is the only constant we have right now. And I'll say this, I put it on the slide for a reason. It is going to be an extremely, extremely challenging year. Our plans are thorough, and again, they're comprehensive, and I think they're well thought out, but they're going to evolve over the year. And I can just give you my commitment. We are committed to continuous self-reflection and a cycle of getting feedback and implementing change based on that feedback. But it's also important to have perspective. It really is. We are still in the middle of the biggest crisis in our professional careers and our personal lives. Our lives and our livelihoods have been significantly impacted, and we're not in that much different a position than we were back in March when we closed. So I just think it's important. We plan to survey families at least monthly to solicit feedback. I think it's really important, and we will change course as necessary. But I think we have to get away from the day-to-day response when things aren't going perfectly. They're not going to go perfectly. And I'm not trying to make an excuse up front. I'm just trying to say, when you see these plans and see how complex it is to educate students in the middle of a pandemic, we need to have some perspective. And I'm going to continue to push the community on that unapologetically. It's going to be challenging enough as it is, but we need to kind of all be in this together and consider where we are as a country right now. So I'll leave it at that. I'm going to completely shift gears for a moment and just share a couple of high-level things about some programs. And I'm doing this now just to provide some context for some of the information the principals are going to share, just so people aren't having this swirling in the back of their mind. Extended Day and Magic Dragon. Extended Day will operate in a hybrid model, but not in a remote model. Students will attend Extended Day on the days that they're in school in person only. And Magic Dragon will operate in the hybrid model, but not in the remote model, okay? We still have a lot of work to do to kind of figure out how to roll those programs out, and that work's going to happen over the next month or so. But I do want to give people kind of clarity that we do expect those programs to operate as long as we're still in a hybrid model, or, you know, obviously in an in-person model also, but not remote. Kindergarten, very important. I should have flipped these slides, but I do believe actually in our plans that our kindergarten students are going to be getting the same experience as all of our elementary students. But we do want to acknowledge and kind of shine a spotlight on that we understand that it's going to feel different in a hybrid model, and that you're only getting 2 days of in-person instruction. And because it's different, we are recommending to the committee, and I don't expect to take a vote tonight, but we are recommending a reduction to the user fee. We're recommending a 60% reduction, moving the fee from $4,000 to $1,600, okay? Very, very important. That fee decrease is not sustainable beyond this year. This is going to be a one-year only change. If we're in the same position next year, we have to have some very difficult conversations about our kindergarten fee and about our kindergarten program. We use about $550,000 a year from our kindergarten fees to offset our budget. Without that fee, we can't run our full day program. So we're able to do this, and Katie can certainly speak to this in a much more intelligent way. We can't afford it this year. I just lost my train of thought. We can't afford it this year, and we're able to do so because we have sufficient balances in our user fee revolving accounts, but it's going to end at the end of the year. So we can come back to that, but I wanted to make that point for all the incoming kindergarten parents who might be thinking about that. And then preschool, for anybody who's listening or interested, preschool actually will operate as usual. They typically operate on a 4-day model. The one big, and by the way, we do need to make the same safety accommodations as we're making, throughout the district, but we can operate preschool as usual. The big change will be that their day off, that their day off will be Wednesday. Did I spell Wednesday? No, is that a spelling error? Instead of Friday. They usually have Friday off in a 4-day model, but it'll be Wednesday off. So again, I just wanted to give parents who are listening that background so they can think about that when they hear the principal's presentation. Any questions about any of what I just said?
Thanks, sounds good.
John, you said we'd have a separate vote about the tuition change, or is that just rolled into the budget?
I think we should take a formal position on it.
Okay. And that'll be at a future time.
Yeah, but we just need to start thinking about it.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Danielle, anything else to add, or are we good?
I don't think so. I think you're good.
All right, I am going to stop my share, and I'm going to turn it over to who?
I think if you can share the presentation,
Oh, do you want me to share the presentation?
that would be great.
Oh, okay. Sarah, you looking? Were you going to?
I'm fine too.
Oh,
Sarah, why don't you share?
Absolutely.
That's okay.
Yep.
I just gave you access.
John, I just wanted to say, I don't know if people are aware of this. I've gotten a bunch of text. Zoom maxes out at 500 guests, and we're maxed out. Nobody can get it onto the call right now.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, it is recording, and so we'll have to make it available to, we'll plan to make it available to the community tomorrow. So that's an unbelievable number, actually.
Okay. So we thank you for having us again. And we're going to just go over, first of all, our welcome back plans for each school. Realizing that it's been since March that students have been out of school, we wanted to really come up with a thoughtful approach to inviting students back and have sort of a rolling start to the school year and giving students a chance to come back on a limited basis during the week of September 8th. So at Chandler, for kindergarten specifically, a normal welcome back schedule for them begins in the spring. And we're usually able to offer many in-person events that we were not able to provide this year. And I completely understand that sending your child to kindergarten is hard enough in a normal year. So we, really feel like we want to make sure that both parents and students have all the information they need to feel comfortable to come back or come for their first year of school in kindergarten. So we're going to be offering a welcome back day for both preschool and kindergarten on September 8th and 9th. We will be welcoming one parent to bring their child to school during a designated time on one of those days. During their visit, students will be able to see their classroom with their parent. They'll be able to sit for an outdoor activity with their teacher and classmates, and then take a bus ride. So those are sort of some of the activities that we missed during the spring that we want to make sure students have a chance to experience here in the fall. Then on Wednesday evening, we will invite first and second grade families to come for a walkthrough as we've done in the past. Classrooms will not be open and teachers will not be present, but students can practice getting to their classroom and walking from the front door to their classroom with their parent. On Thursday and Friday of that week, we'll invite first and second grade students to come for a portion of one morning from 9:10 to 11:25. Cohort A will come on Thursday and Cohort B will come on Friday. This will also give a chance for students who are registered for the bus to take the bus to and from school in those days. During that week, we'll also be scheduling virtual introductions for any students who are in Cohort C to meet their classroom teacher and any other appropriate staff. This will mean that on Monday, the week of September 14th, we will start our regular AB cohort schedule with full bus transportation for all Chandler students. Then we will be hosting a virtual open house on September 17th.
Erin,
Yes,
can I just stop you for a moment?
please.
I just wanted back to what Peter said. I'm trying to stream. I think I'm live. I think I'm now streaming live on Facebook.
It says on my monitor you are, John.
Okay, so yeah, it is. I just pulled it up. We are live on Facebook. if anybody's asking. And I'll try to tweet that out right now too, so people are aware. Aaron, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Nope, that's okay. I'm finished.
Aaron, can I say one thing since you are finished?
Sure.
I just do want to say, I talked earlier about how these plans were still in draft form for a lot of different reasons, but also because we haven't completed negotiations with the Duxbury Teachers Association. This kind of orientation week schedule is still one of the things that we're still actively in discussion about. So we're hopeful that we can roll this plan out, but it's possible that it'll be tweaked a little bit depending on those discussions. So I just wanted to make that point out of respect for the process.
The Alden plan looks very similar. No school on Labor Day, like the kindergarten, although it's going to be a little different. We do want to expose the third graders to Alden School. We missed some of those opportunities in the spring, although I did post on the Alden School YouTube channel a number of walkthroughs and interviews with third grade teachers, which are still available. Cheap plug, third grade families to go out there and take a look at those videos. But third grade families will have a chance, like you heard from Ms. Wiesahan, to walk through. This is a little bit more of a classroom peek than the kindergarten is, but there's a couple of times they're divided up by cohorts A and B. Cohort A from 8 to 9:30 and cohort B from 12:30 to 2. And that's an opportunity for students to come with one parent again, kind of locate their classroom, orient themselves a little bit for later in the week on Thursday and Friday, when we have a welcome back, very abbreviated day with all students for cohort A on Thursday and cohort B on Friday, 7:45 to 10 o'clock with bus service, kind of mimicking what the days will look like starting on the 14th. So again, September 14th, we'll start the regular cohort AB schedule with bus transportation, like on Thursday and Friday. And then our open house date hasn't changed. It's September 16th. There will be a virtual open house on September 16th. We also have yet to schedule, but we normally also will have an evening event there with new families, but it's just not scheduled yet.
All right, so this is the middle school orientation plan. So much like Alden and Chandler, this is a proposed schedule of events for our middle school students and families. Our goal is to provide all the students with the opportunity to be in the building and navigate with our new procedures and protocols, meet their teachers, and cover a variety of orientation topics over the course of a half day. And then in addition to that half day, we're looking to build some virtual class-wide events, so grade level classes, and likely some video content to provide students with the opportunity to connect together and thoughtfully transition to the beginning of the school year. You'll notice as well that we are incorporating the typical web orientation into this week for our incoming sixth graders and any new students. It's possible that we might shift that schedule slightly. But again, this is in draft form and we want to include all those orientation opportunities for kids, whether they're virtually or in person. So you'll notice that we've got the cohort split, and we do have cohort C joining our cohort B schedule, and they would be doing their portion of orientation virtually, going through their schedule. You'll also notice that we have scheduled the middle school open house to happen that week virtually. We thought, given the circumstances, that offering the parents an opportunity to connect earlier with their teachers was important, with their children's teachers, I should say, was important, and it provides the opportunity for some earlier parent training and support, just given the environment we're going to be in. I do want to note that in this schedule, we would not be providing bus transportation to students for that orientation week for middle school.
And then moving on to the high school, we have a very similar schedule to the middle school. We're breaking up 9th and 10th grade cohorts coming together on Tuesday, and 11th and 12th grade on Thursday. And we'll be running our normal Meet Your Assistant Principal assemblies virtually on Wednesday and Friday. Like the middle school, our link orientation program will run at some point in this week. We are working with the advisors to kind of optimize the best time while balancing their expectations of being staff and participating in the professional development that week. So I would say that is the placement on Tuesday at this point is tentative, but it will occur in some form this week. And just like the middle school, open house is going to get moved up for the high school to September 8th. And it will occur virtually. And more details about that will be forthcoming as we get closer to the first days of school.
Okay, so last week we spoke about an in-person and a hybrid model and what those entail. And today we wanted to give you some more specific details about the different parts of the student day with this sort of day in the life of a student overview. Because Mr. E and I didn't want to be redundant, I'm going to talk about elementary students as a whole, which will cover both Chandler and Alden students. And then Mr. E will talk about the remote model for both Chandler and Alden. So if a student is riding the bus to school in the morning, they will each have their own assigned seat. Siblings are able to share seats on the bus, but not neighbors or friends, and masks are worn on the bus at all times. Once students arrive at school, buses will be unloaded a few at a time. Staff at both schools will be outside to help guide students and maintain distance. And at Chandler, for those of you who have participated in our parent drop-off line, you know we open doors for children to get out. Staff will be opening car doors in the same way, but obviously wearing a mask and gloves. Once students are in the classroom, they'll sit at their desks or at designated spaces and participate in morning meeting. Students who are at home will also be logged into that same morning meeting because you know, there are obvious differences in the morning meeting in this model, but other than those obvious differences, these are very similar to morning meetings that we're used to. So teachers will lead students in calendar and greeting routines. They'll have short games or activities, class discussions. They will have a chance to speak together as peers and to hear an overview of topics of instruction and routines and the schedule for the day. Once instruction begins, the priority will take place for students that are in person and in the classroom that day. Teachers will be providing whole group instruction, small group instruction, one-on-one instruction. Special ed services will be provided for students in school. We will be using individually assigned manipulatives to assist in learning new concepts, and students will continue to wear masks throughout their time in the classroom. Sarah, can you move on to the next slide there? So as we said last week, students at Chandler have 2 recesses during the day, one with their classroom teacher and one with a recess assistant. Students at Alden will continue to have 1 recess. We will continue to make sure that we can get students outside whenever possible. Currently, we go outside whenever it is above 20 degrees for the real field temperature, including the wind chill. We'll be sure to maintain that guideline for this school year. Each class will be given a designated area on the playground, and these areas will rotate regularly, so all students have a chance to play on all areas of the playground. And after each recess, all shared equipment will be sanitized. Students will have both snack and lunch in their classrooms. They'll be spaced at least 6 feet apart while eating. Lunch orders will be taken every morning for students who are buying, and then lunches will be delivered to the classrooms. Students will wash their hands before eating and after eating, and they are going to be asked to stay in their seats while eating. And really, anytime students get up from their seats during the lunch period, they'll need to be wearing their mask. Much like morning instruction, afternoon instruction will include a combination of whole group and small group and one-on-one. Special ed services will still be provided, and students will be working together in their classroom, much like they did in the morning. So at Chandler, we are fortunate to have some classrooms have designated bathrooms. This is certainly true for our preschool and kindergarten classrooms. For some first and second grade classrooms and all Alden school classrooms, students share hallway bathrooms. So we will teach students the procedure for one student in and one student out of these hallway bathrooms. And hand washing will be important as ever. Special areas in general are a really important and fun part of students' day. And so we've worked out a rotating schedule at each school with some remote instruction for special area teachers and some in-person instruction. Each day when students are in school, they will have at least one special in person with the schedule. So it may be that students have an art class in person one week and then a remote art experience the following week. And because students normally have two PE classes in 1 week, in this hybrid model, each student would have at least one in-person PE class every week. All special areas, art, music, Spanish, library, and PE will be outside as much as possible. And when they can't be outside, they'll be taught in the classroom. So I should also mention throughout all the daily events that I just talked about, teachers will be scheduling mask breaks throughout the day based on their schedule and their students' needs. We'll have areas outside available for teachers to access and options for indoor mask breaks throughout the day if there's inclement weather. When it's time for student dismissal, at both schools, we'll be spreading out bus dismissal as much as possible to limit the number of students in the hallway. For parent pickup at Chandler, we will have students spaced out in the gym and the cafeteria and be escorting students out to their parents at the end of the day with a car line dismissal. At Alden, students will be dismissed outside to the rear of the building where parents will wait for their children and they'll be dismissed to them outside. And unless there's any questions about the in-person days, Mr. E is going to talk about the remote portion of the hybrid plan and then the full remote plan.
Awesome, thank you. Welcome, everyone. So I'm going to talk about remote days, both in the hybrid model and then the full remote model. So in the hybrid, the remote days look like what you can see there. It starts with morning meeting, and students start their day at a time consistent with their in-person school day, meaning at Chandler or at Alden school hours, and participate in a morning Zoom meeting with the students present at the school building for the day. So it's the entire class, half on Zoom, half in person. That time allows for teachers and students to all connect with each other as a complete classroom community. Morning work time follows after that. So after the morning meeting, students begin schoolwork for the day. They'll log on to Clever in order to check their online learning platform, either Seesaw at Chandler or Google Classroom at Alden. Students will work to complete assignments sent home from the prior day of in-person learning at school, including anything that might be handwritten assignments or paper and pencil tasks, other hands-on activities, and digital lessons. Students will use home manipulatives provided by the school to assist in their learning, watch pre-recorded lesson videos, and receive any special education services required. Afternoon work and instruction may include further practice of those concepts and skills, both digital and hands-on, depending. Special students will be able to access the pre-recorded lessons from special area teachers. And then there'll be an end of the day meeting. So students will end their day at a time, again, consistent with their in-person school day, and participate in an afternoon Zoom meeting with all students present at school for the day. So that might include any end of the day routines, depending on the classroom, peer sharing, preview of what's to come the following day, and so forth. And now we move on to the hybrid Wednesdays. A lot of it can look very similar. I'm going to go through it anyway. So morning work, again, very similar to morning work during those other hybrid days. Students start by, again, logging onto Clever, checking for assignments on their appropriate learning platforms, Seesaw and Google Classroom, complete assignments, and this might include pre-recorded lessons and videos. Students, of course, are taking breaks from devices and working to spend time outside, eat lunch, interact with adults and siblings at home, and read. In the afternoon, they're back at work like the morning, and that consists of using home manipulatives to complete assignments, work on projects, watch or rewatch assigned lesson videos, and digital skills practice time. And moving on to the full remote model. And some of this, again, looks similar. So the morning meeting, instead of being, half in person and half virtual, this is a live virtual meeting where students participate in the regular morning routine. Again, that might include, depending on the school calendar, or greeting, have a chance to hear from their peers and just kind of connect, get a preview of the day's topics of instruction. Morning instruction, just like in those the hybrid remote model, students log into Clever again, visit Seesaw, Google Classroom, depending on their school, for daily announcements, and they will be participating in any scheduled live small group direct instruction, including special education services. Students watch lesson videos for instruction, work on digital and/or paper pencil assignments and projects. And again, I'm saying some of the same things over and over, but they'll use school-provided manipulatives to assist in their learning and instruction. We expect them to be taking midday breaks for lunch and recess while they're at school. So again, they're taking time for lunch, outside playtime, maybe reading. Back in the afternoon, they're continuing to practice concepts and skills from either the videos or any other instruction they received virtually. Special area teachers, specials would still exist in a remote environment. Special area teachers would run live remote sessions for their weekly classes. Perhaps they'd be consolidated. Students would have, again, library Spanish, art, music, 2 times PE, and those would occur on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, depending on the schedule. And end of the day meeting, just like in that hybrid model, we talked about a beginning and an end of the day meeting. Students would end their day, again, at a time consistent with their in-person school day, and participate in an afternoon Zoom meeting with all students. Again, end of the day routines, peer sharing, maybe preview of the following day, talking about how their day went. And it's just a chance to connect as a classroom community, and as much as possible in that remote environment to continue to foster that classroom community.
Chase, can I just pause you guys just for a second? This is hard to do remotely. Danielle, sorry, I don't mean to have a conversation with Danielle over this, but there's some questions which concern me that, although it's been widely disseminated, that there might be some confusion about what the actual schedule for the hybrid model is. And I think it's worth maybe just taking a minute pause to reiterate that. Danielle, do you want to share slides, or you want to just talk about?
Sure. I'm going to open, if you can just give me a second, I'll open and then share my screen with the presentation from last week. And then maybe we could just very briefly go over the hybrid model at each of the schools, the highlights of it, and what the AB cohort means, just for any families that maybe weren't able to attend the meeting last week.
The reason we're doing that is because we're seeing questions, to that effect, and I don't want people to be lost throughout the entire presentation without any context.
I'm almost ready.
I'm sorry to put this pause on.
Okay, so if I can share my screen for a moment. Are you able to see the Chandler School hybrid plan?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hit present.
Yep, I'll hit present, so it's larger. Okay. Erin, do you want to just give a mile-high overview of that so you're not having to get into the same detail that you did last week?
Sure. So each classroom at Chandler, K through 2, will be broken up into 2 cohorts, Group A and Group B. Cohort A would come to school on Mondays and Thursdays, and Group B would come to school on Tuesdays and Fridays. Remote days would be, Wednesday would be a remote day for everybody, and the opposite day of their in-person day would also be remote. During each school day, every student will participate in a morning and afternoon meeting. And whether they are in person, they'll participate with their teacher in front of them. And if they're at home, they will log into the meeting and participate remotely with the rest of their class. During the school day, the teacher will be prioritizing instruction for the students in front of them. And like I said last week, in every elementary classroom, you know, there are portions of every day that are direct instruction and then portions of the day that are independent practice. So we're going to be taking the in-person time to prioritize that direct instruction and then using the at-home time to do our independent practice. So we are also mindful at the elementary level that we want to make sure the independent practice that they're participating in at home is not all with screen time and not all on the computer. So students are going to have their workbooks at home. They're going to have materials at home like manipulatives for math and other materials that they normally have access to at school. They'll have those available to them at home to be able to complete some of that work in that way.
We're going to get into the cohort C a little bit later in the presentation that we're doing for tonight. So I'm going to skip over to Alden to the hybrid plan.
Sure. And I mean, this isn't all that different from what Ms. Wiesahan just said about Chandler. I mean, we've broken the grades up, or the whole school population up into cohorts A and B. All students participate in the morning and afternoon meetings, and Wednesday is reserved as an independent learning day and planning day for teachers. I'm not sure I need to go into more detail than that.
Chase, you want to skip over this so we're not?
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
I feel like this is sort of a summary of what we just talked about.
Okay.
Danielle,
Did I pass by?
no, we actually just dropped it into the deck we were in.
Okay.
So do you want me to start sharing again and then we can kind of resume where we were and we'll go over those
Absolutely.
slides. Does that work?
Yep, I think I stopped sharing.
Okay, perfect. I gotta pick the right window here. Okay. We can see this now, right? Okay. So like what Mrs. Wiesahan and Mr. E were saying, similarly at the middle school for our hybrid plan, we have students at each grade level broken into 2 groups, cohorts A and B.
Just hit present if you don't mind.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you.
I apologize, yeah.
So the cohorts are assigned 2 days of in-person learning and 2 days of remote learning, with Wednesdays as a virtual learning day without scheduled class times, but where students can work independently. We'll have activities to do and have access to teachers to connect through office hours. And the day for teachers is designated for teacher prep and co-planning and things like that. So as you can see, on Mondays and Thursdays, Cohort A would be in person while Cohort B is remote. And on Tuesdays and Fridays, Cohort B would be in person while Cohort A is remote. In an important part of our shift next year that we talked about at length last week is that in any of our plans, actually, in the full return, hybrid, or full remote plan, we're proposing a schedule shift for the year. What we're proposing is that we would have an 8-block schedule of about 40-minute periods, with the first 4 periods meeting in the morning, our new directed study block falling in the middle of the day, where we would also incorporate lunch, and then the periods 5, 6, and 7 occurring in the afternoon. And this would be the schedule we would use for both the middle and the high school. I referenced last week one of the items we're working to address here is frequent connection between students and teachers, regardless of if you are on your at-home days or on your in-person days. And we thought adjusting the schedule, given the circumstances, was appropriate.
Hi, everybody. And so for the high school, and again, an identical model to the middle school, where we have Group A or Cohort A, Group B, and Cohort B, and that they'll alternate between in-person and virtual, Monday, Thursday, and Tuesday, Friday, with Wednesday being the virtual day for everyone. And just a reminder, if I can take a minute, just to how the cohorts are being developed across the district. So we're lining them up vertically. So families who have students at Chandler or Alden or the middle school or the high school, all of their kids will be in the same cohort district-wide. So they'll be attending school on the same day, and they'll be having virtual days on the same day.
Are we okay to get back into the day in the life of, we think?
I think so.
So,
Thank you all for doing that. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. So to continue on, again, like Alden and Chandler, we adjusted the perspective on some of this information for you this week as we go through our hybrid and remote plans, so that they're from the view of a student. And much like Mrs. Wiesahan and Mr. E, Mr. Donovan and I are going to divide this these next few slides up, because the middle school and the high school are predominantly functioning the same way in these circumstances. So for our students, when they're in person at school, when we're in a hybrid model, their morning begins with their arrival to school, which would be after 7:50 in the morning. Students will go directly to their period 1 class, which will start at 8:20. Typically, in a normal year, we do have students able to kind of move through the building and congregate in the cafeteria or the library. We will not be able to do that this year. And students will also not be using their lockers. So students in grades 6 through 12 will be able to carry their backpacks with them throughout the day, so that they have their belongings. And like I mentioned earlier, students are going to follow an 8-block schedule with periods 1 through 4 in the morning, a directed study period in the middle of the day where lunch occurs, and then periods 5 through 7 in the afternoon. Students in class are going to experience at least a portion of the day, of the class, synchronously with their peers who are at home. And the types of things that could happen during that synchronous experience with the kids at home could be a preview or a review of concepts, some direct instruction, some collaborative work, reviewing the agenda, taking attendance, and things like that. The remaining class time in person will be collaborative or individual work with students in the classroom seated at least 3 feet, but ideally 6 feet from each other, facing forward. The classes will use outdoor space when possible, and mass breaks will occur based on teacher discretion throughout the day as well. For certain electives, such as PE and music, students will be outside as much as possible and abide by those extended distance expectations set by the DESE guidance for both PE and music. And at the middle school, we have electives teamed as much as possible to manage sort of the broad groups of students who are in classes together. Academic support is going to occur during the directed study block for 40 minutes of time, and students in school will be grouped on their team at DMS for this block. Students will either be getting support from the teacher in the room or virtually connecting with group members for activities at home or completing independent work. And then for 30 minutes during that period, students will also eat lunch. They will have had the opportunity to select their lunch by ordering online at an earlier time. And lunch is going to be at the middle school brought to the team areas where students will be able to pick those lunches up if they purchased lunch. And then students will eat their lunch in a variety of scheduled places around the building and outside for DMS. And we're sort of managing the spaces to allow for that expanded space between students as they have their lunch. All SPED services are going to be provided during the bell schedule, and students will receive their services in accordance with their service delivery grid. And like Mr. E and Mrs. Wiesahan described, dismissal is going to be managed in a way that controls the number of students in the hallway and is staggered appropriately given how students are going home for the day. Mr. Donovan's going to talk about if you are at home in the hybrid model.
So, the hybrid model, the remote days for a hybrid model at the middle school and the high school will function identically to those that are to the students that are in school, with only really a change of setting. So the students will start with the first bell at 8:20. They're expected to be in every class throughout the day, dressed and ready to go. We'll take attendance for each building in each class. And our students are expected to be on time. There will be, right now about 15 minutes we're projecting of synchronous instruction. Students and parents should imagine that as being different on different days. So it could be that there's a check-in at the beginning and then a check-in back at the end. It could be all at the front. It could be all at the end. It could fluctuate day to day. Synchronous instruction may include preview or review of concepts. It could be new direct instruction of skills, or it could be individual or collaborative work which lasts the entire period. Students will then move in and out of these direct instruction collaborative environments over the course of the period and over the course of the day. Academic support block will require the students check in. Teachers at the high school are being asked to conference with kids over the course of the week, one-on-one. So those conferences will continue. And students will also use that time, the lunch period when their peers will be eating lunch in school, as time to have lunch at home. On Wednesdays, Wednesdays would be our obviously it's our virtual learning day, and so the expectations are a little different. For all students, whether they're in school or out of school, they'll be provided with approximately 40 minutes of work for their classes each day, the equivalent of a school day, and they'll be required to submit work in each course on those days, and that the submission of work will be what is recorded as their attendance for that day. Of course, across all of our remote days, our students with IEPs will continue to receive their services per their service delivery grid, and they will line up with the bell schedule. And that's a very good setup for our remote model, which is in the case that all students are home, we would follow the exact same expectations that I just outlined. School begins at 8:20, ends at 2:40, 2:44, 2:46, depending upon the dismissal schedule, there's an expectation of at least 15 minutes of synchronous activities for the whole class over the course of the period. Those activities will look and sound and be very similar to what they were doing in a hybrid setup, should we find ourselves in this setup. And then moving forward, Ms. McGuire. The academic support period will still exist should we be in a remote model. We'll continue to have the conferencing, we'll continuing to have access to guidance services, and there'll still be a dedicated time each day for kids to go and eat. And the virtual learning days on Wednesdays will function just as they had. There won't be a requirement that kids check in like the normal bell schedule, but there will be some office hours and times that will be available for students. They'll have work that's required to be submitted and be submitted. And then again, students with an IEP and special education services will have access in a full remote model consistent with their service delivery grid. And those services will also line up according to the bell schedule. And so Mrs. Bresnahan asked a question about this last week when we talked about homework, because we're switching at the middle school and the high school to 7 periods or 7 classes a day. That academic support block is also a time where kids can get ahead and work on coursework for other classes. But we did want to address homework in general. And so we understand certainly that if we're in a virtual environment in both our hybrid model and if we find ourselves in a virtual remote model, homework served a very specific function when we were in school, and we wanted to kind of articulate the difference if we're in these remote models, which really is we have coursework that all students will be expected to complete. And we really do feel like we need to retain these individual learning and practice opportunities for students outside of the school day, outside of that 8:20 to 2:46. But we have made adjustments to the policies and to the expectations. So the big ones are that over the course of an entire week, we would expect about 4 to 6 hours of total coursework. That includes in-person and remote for full year courses at both the middle school and the high school. At the middle school, this equates to approximately 10 minutes of homework per class with adjustments for days 1 and day 2. We should expect that AP students at the high school receive more hours of coursework per week, consistent with the expectations of the AP program. Our aim is for all of our assessments and assignments, both major and minor, to be visible in Schoology and also to be able to be completed synchronously between those students who are in the classroom and at home.
Okay, I think it's my turn to go over some information about the cohorts, and we've been keeping our eye on questions in the chat, so we'll try to answer those as we go along. Cohort notification, we know that families are waiting right now because they're trying to set up plans for the fall, and we are working as quickly as we can to, we're waiting right now because we're submitting our state data for our school district, and that is a process that we usually spend the whole month of July and the beginning of August working on before we can roll over into the new school year. So we're finishing that up this week, and we're hoping that cohort A and B assignments will be shared with families early next week. So we're hoping that families will be able to log into Aspen or will receive a notification as early in the week as possible. With that, we had some questions in the chat. We did try to, families will be kept together in the A and B cohorts, and the principals have been working really hard to make sure that family members are in the same cohort. We also attempted to, at the youngest grades in Chandler School, have a familiar face in the cohorts, which is challenging, and we're trying to keep approximately a 50% ratio of our students in the building, and we weren't able to do that just by splitting the alphabet. So just to warn everyone now, it wasn't a clean like A through L, etc., that we were able to do for the split. With the cohort information, once that is available, we're going to immediately send families an opt-out of the hybrid model if that is indeed what is voted tonight at school committee. And that would be for the families that have indicated to us that they will not be sending their students to school in person for a variety of reasons. So Some of you have already notified us, which has been helpful, but we are going to ask families that have been on the fence to let us know by Monday, August 17th, if they're going to be indeed putting their children in the Cohort C group. The reason we need that information by August 17th is there are staffing implications depending on the numbers of students that we have in Cohort C. We've had a number of people reach out to ask us about requests to have children in the same cohort, and we are not able to accommodate those requests because we simply couldn't manage that. Would be too complicated in order to maintain our even groups. But we want to just say that we're really grateful for the families that are trying to think creatively about how to support their students with their at-home learning, and we understand that you need this information from us as soon as possible to be able to do that. Once we have a sense of actual Cohort C numbers, we'll be able to give you much more detailed information about what this model will look like. And we will tell you that some families will be notified, and you might already know this, that if their students are considered to be high needs, they may be attending school in person 4 days per week in the hybrid model. So they'd be both with A and B students in school. Okay, so if you're an elementary Cohort C student, you would be assigned to a class as usual. So you'll have your classroom teacher assignment, and you would participate in the morning and afternoon meetings on the schedule with the students that are in school or home. So you'd be on the Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday and Friday. You'd be participating virtually in those class meetings. Wednesdays are the teacher preparation day and the virtual learning day, so there would not be class meetings those days. Wednesdays would be virtual independent learning days for all students, including Cohort C. If you're an elementary Cohort C person, you would be provided your small group instruction and academic support during the week from another elementary teacher. So you would be able to know the schedule for when those meetings would occur, and this would be a separate teacher than your classroom teacher, we envision. And the classroom teacher and your Cohort C teacher would be working together collaboratively to complete the same assignments for the week that the students in the classroom would be doing. So the instruction would be provided by a different teacher, however, the content would be the same. If a child's class would move into our remote model for any reason, if we had a situation where we needed to have the students working from home, students that are in Cohort C would then join their classmates to their assigned class. And their small group instruction would then move to their classroom teacher. There will be a virtual orientation session available, or sessions available for Cohort C students, so that we can give you more definite information and be able to answer any questions that you might have depending on what level your students are at. We've had a few questions. If a family decides to opt out of our hybrid model, but they've changed their mind and they want to opt back into the hybrid model, at the elementary level, we would ask that you would reach out to your building principal to set up a discussion about how that would best take place. And just to be clear, Cohort C is not exactly the same as our district remote learning model. We heard from many families that they were really hoping that we'd be able to have Duxbury teachers supporting the learning of the students that are not attending in person. So in able to accommodate that, we've had to get really creative to be able to make Cohort C work instead of having students on a fully separate virtual learning platform, which is another option for students maybe in other districts are looking at those models. But just to be clear, your student would not be considered on a remote learning model. They would be, we're going to be potentially in a hybrid situation, and Cohort C would be accommodated within that model. The secondary level, students would participate in Cohort C in the synchronous learning component of their classes following the bell schedule, and that would take place on Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday and Friday. Again, Wednesday would be a virtual learning day. So on that virtual learning day, we would hope that students that are working in Cohort C would have a chance to check in with their classroom teachers during the established office hours for that teacher, so that if they had some questions about their work, they would be able to do that on Wednesday. It may be necessary at the secondary level to have students participate in fully virtual courses. We do have a platform that we use here in district just in a typical year. It's a called Peak program. So they offer a variety of classes that are intended to be fully online. So depending on the student's schedule, if a peak class or whatever platform we select is chosen, we would be able to support the learning with students in a virtual course with one of our Duxbury teachers. And so that would be set up with support from the guidance department. So the thing about the secondary level is students' schedules are very specific. And so every student might have a different schedule and levels of courses they're taking. So it's going to be something we have to take on a case-by-case basis for students that are in Cohort C, especially at the high school level. If a family is interested in flexing back into the hybrid model, if they start the year in the Cohort C model, we probably wouldn't be able to have it happen as quickly as we might be able to at the elementary level. It's just a little more complicated. So again, we would ask families that are opting back in to set up a meeting with guidance and the building principal or assistant principal to be able to make a plan of when it might be most appropriate. And that could be at the end of a semester or at another natural break. Next slide. And so I mentioned earlier that there may be some students that attend school in person in a hybrid model 4 days a week. And there are some really specific guidelines. Heather Tucker is on the call. She was having a little bit of audio difficulty. I don't know, see, oh, Heather, you're saying that your audio is on. Please feel free to, I'll go through the slide, and if there's anything that you can add, that would be great. So DESE has defined students with significant and complex needs as being identified through the IEP team process as having high needs and having 2 of the following criterion: services provided outside of the general education environment, service providers or special education teachers and related service providers, and their special education services constitute 75% of the student's day. So that's very IEP specific. Also, students who use primarily aided and augmentative communication, students who cannot engage in remote learning due to their disability, homeless students, students in foster care, or students that are also identified as English learners. So we've been working to create a list of our high need students for the district. It is not every student on an IEP is able to attend 4 days a week. Unfortunately, we have to really look closely at the most significantly students that need to be in school with the most significance, because we want to maintain, we don't want to maintain, we have to maintain the 50% ratio, and we have to be careful about numbers. And we simply couldn't accommodate every student on a 504 or an IEP to be in person in this model. Heather, would you like to add anything?
We use our IEP tracking system. Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, all right. We used our IEP tracking system to look at students' placement pages and the identification of high needs, as well as secret services. So that's really a lot of what's driving our identified students. And then we're taking into consideration other factors like extended school year, to really dig down into what has been identified as high need students. And we will be looking to inform parents with that notification of the cohorts. You'll see that your student has been identified as a high need student for cohorts A and B.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Heather.
Yep.
So I'm looking in the chat. There was a couple of questions that I think I can answer. I think I did see a question. If you selected to come back to school as a hybrid student, would you be able to opt into the Cohort C? And we need to be extremely flexible with families this year about if for any reason you're not able to continue to send your child to school due to any reason, you certainly could opt in. It'll be a conversation with the principals, but right now we can't, we do need to know who's starting the fall in the Cohort C model so that we can plan for appropriate staffing. It's going to be a complicated task for us over the next few weeks to look at how we might be able to utilize our Duxbury teachers to support any of our fully remote students, and to be able to determine if there's outside courses that the students might need to be enrolled in. I saw a question about, do Cohort C students at the secondary level, are they expected to be logged in and working with the course schedule, with their daily schedule? And the answer to that is yes. So if you're a Cohort C student, you'd have your schedule and you'd be expected to go to class with your schedule to be there for attendance, any announcements, any instruction the teacher's providing. You should be able to work with the students in that class collaboratively during that class period. So we would expect our secondary remote learners to be following their schedule. The only day that the students are not on the schedule at the secondary level would be Wednesday. That would be a virtual learning day. And we're hoping that there will be a time during that day when students would be able to ask, check in with teachers if they had any questions or needed some additional support during an office hours session that is to be determined. John, is there anything else in the chat that you've seen that you would like me to comment on before we wrap up with this?
I don't think so. A lot of the questions I hope were answered, especially about the cohorts, how they were developed. I think we should maybe turn it to the school committee right now.
Could I just answer one question? I noticed a couple times in the chat. The middle school is still using teams, 2 teams at each grade level, and we're aiming for about 50% of the team to be in cohort A and about 50% of the team to be in cohort B.
And just to add that, at the high school, we'll have, we're shooting for 50% of each grade level to be in cohort A and in cohort B.
Great.
So my first question is, you're proposing opening the year in the hybrid model. How periodically will you be reviewing that decision once the school year is opened? And what would prompt you to change the model?
It's a tough question, Julia. I mean, I think we're going to be kind of perpetually assessing how it's going. I mean, realistically, I think the health data is going to be what we're going to have to be guided by. We're waiting right now for the state to hopefully provide us what they're calling trigger metrics, right? Where if your local community hits a certain percentage of, transmission rate, that might trigger, hence the term, might trigger us to jump from hybrid to full remote. I have to say that's one thing that just no one in the state has a good answer for right now. But it's going to be the health data that's going to guide that decision solely.
And Desi is planning on telling us what kind of health data to be looking at?
I'm waiting. I hope so. It's really, it's being, I don't mean to be flip about it. It's actually, it is, even in our call earlier today with the state, they're promising us, some information on that imminently, and we just don't have it yet.
Will they, John?
That's fair.
Oh, I'm sorry, Julia.
I was just going to say, I think that's fair, but it's a difficult set of metrics for them to discern because the science is not conclusive yet. Everything is quite new. But I'd like to see our district acting on the same types of metrics that other districts are doing as we change. If we're prompted to move to fully remote, or we decide that things are going so well at hybrid, we can open fully in person. I'd like to have the confidence that we're using metrics that somebody else also thinks are reasonable.
Right, I agree. Matt?
John, does Desi, I guess I'm making the assumption that a lot of the metrics that you're waiting for and that you guys will be using are geared more toward if things get worse and we have to go full remote. Is Desi giving any indication that there'll also be, Julia just alluded to this, but is there any indication that we'll be also getting metrics that will help us understand what improvement looks like and whether we can go from hybrid to fully in person?
So I'm speculating here, but here's what I think is going to happen. I think they're going to give us one number. Okay, I'm going to make this up, but the number is going to be, let's say, a 5% case rate. I don't know if that's the right term, right? In a community, right? Let's say there's 5% of Duxbury community is contracted COVID, and we're going to be able to use that number either way we want to, right? We might say if it hits 5%, we should go remote. It also might say if it's at 5% or below, we could take that under advisement and decide to go in person. I think it's just going to be more of a guidepost than anything. And by the way, given that number, we could absolutely go back in person now, right? If you look at that type of metric and the type of rates that are happening in the Duxbury community, I'd say based on kind of the tone and tenor of the coronavirus debate and conversation, people aren't feeling that's a viable option. So I think it'll be one number that we'll be able to use it to go one way or the other, but it's going to be a local decision. I don't want to lose sight of that. This is our decision. I'm not happy about it. I think the state left us completely hanging out to dry, but it is our decision. So
that was my other question was if as a community we find when we open hybrid that several classrooms in a particular school have to go into quarantine because cases emerge.
Yeah.
Do we have the ability to decide based on our own very local data that we're going to shut a school and put a school fully remote or put all our schools fully remote, or maybe things go much better than we think?
Yes, we can make any decision we want locally. I'm glad you asked that. That's a good clarifying question.
So, John, just a couple of comments. We like to think we live in a bubble, but this is a case where a pandemic surrounds us. So the likelihood of Duxbury being in some unique situation that allows us to do something which is contrary to our neighbors, our similar communities across the state is just so remote. But my question for you is, what are you hearing, John? I know school districts and superintendents are having these discussions around the Commonwealth. Do you have a sense of just directional of the schools that have either provided guidance or any, as far as you're aware of, planning to open fully in person? Are any having announced that are nearby us full remote to start the year? I know Somerville announced full remote as an example, but just in general, what are you hearing from the other superintendents? You're in touch with a lot of them.
Yeah.
Just where do you think we are? But I think we have to avoid Duxbury's so unique and so special, we can kind of go our own way. I mean, certainly we want to take advantage of our uniqueness, but we're not that unique compared to Marshfield, Situate, Plymouth, Kingston, on and on and on, So anyhow, what are you hearing? That's really a long way to say, what are you hearing?
Yeah, good question. I don't have the exact data. I'm just not privy to it. I would speculate, though, based on what I do know, that easily 95 to potentially 100% are either going remote or hybrid, or I should say hybrid or remote. I'd say the vast majority of districts throughout the Commonwealth, and I can say definitively on the South Shore, are recommending a hybrid model.
Great.
There are some districts that are proposing all remote. Some of the larger urbans are, but there's also some suburban districts that are as well. Franklin just announced, for example, this week that they're starting. It's a larger town than ours, but it's still a suburb. They announced all remote. I heard of a couple of smaller districts too. I think there might be very tiny pockets, maybe way out in Western Mass, where maybe they're proposing a full in-person return, like at the elementary level or at kindergarten or something like that. Very tiny pockets, though. Mm-hmm. So I'd say the vast majority are where we are today.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And as far as feedback over the past few weeks from parents, not all of it has found its way to school committee for various reasons, which is not a complaint at all. But in terms of what you and other administrators have been hearing from parents, are there families, what proportion of feedback is from families who feel completely unable to manage with a hybrid or remote model?
So Julia, it's a good question, actually. And honestly, it's not as many, we don't get as much communication as one might think. I'd say at the district level, Danielle and I in particular, I mean, we might have received 20, 25 emails. At the school level, much less. Aaron, I know, received probably 10 to 15 emails. but beyond that, not much more. And what I would say is this, I don't know what the split is. At best, it's 50-50, right? All I know is everybody's passionate about their opinion, right? And so there's a lot of declarations about what is absolutely the right thing to do. And there's a lot of, you know, a lot of people propose their recommendations, like we should consider X, for example, but it's really split down the middle. And if anybody thinks that there's a right decision here, they're not talking to the right people. To Peter's point earlier, Duxbury is not in a bubble. We are 50-50 at best, so again, and no one, and that has not, and it's a good question because you look for themes sometimes and there's no themes. A lot of it, I have to say, and I don't mean to sound critical when I say this, a lot of it is emotion right now. And so,
Yeah, I think the theme I can see, and perhaps it's the only consistent item in the entire picture we're looking at, is that there is no certainty, as you alluded, there's no certainty. So all families are going to have some plan B for a fully remote model, because there is no certainty that at some point the governor might decide to shut the schools again.
right.
Or there are a sufficient number of classrooms in our district which have COVID-19 cases that classrooms are quarantined for 2 weeks. So there is no, I mean, and I say this with great empathy, there is no opportunity for parents to not have a plan B because of the uncertainty that we're looking at. And it could be very local, just their child's classroom has to go 2 weeks in quarantine. So that to me is the perhaps the only consistent message one can draw out of this whole thing, is that plan B has to be in place for every family, and that's a big ask.
Yeah. That's a great way to say it. And I think that's consistent amongst educators too, that, you know, we are, again, it's all speculation, but we're kind of all just assuming that we might end up in remote. And, you know, it might not be driven by data. I want to say a lot of it is going to be driven by emotion. I mean, you all watch the same news I watch, but, you know, when there's single cases in pockets around the country, people are kind of reacting quite strongly. So you want to stay on, we need to stay unemotional about it, but we need to just kind of take the cues from our community.
Well, and you know, I would just like to chime in because, you know, the guidance is changing, of course, but, you know, I pulled the mask guidance as a reminder, and, you know, and this may not be the latest guidance, but this was as of July 3rd. The state guidance is no more than 8 people in 1,000 square foot indoor space, no more than 25 people in any enclosed room. And I think, John, you mentioned, and I think everyone in the community understands, we have 3,500 people that would be in 5 buildings if we were full in person. That is just not feasible. When the state guidance is 8 people per 1,000 square feet or a maximum of 25 in any enclosed space, we can't get 3,500 people into our 5 buildings. So for the time being, full and remote is not possible under current guidance. It's just not. We can't do it. So hybrid is trying to get us in that direction, right? If the state guidance changes and the degree of infection were to change in a material way. But I think the positives that have been described, and people contrast this with the spring, is it still your intention to have the teachers in the classrooms on the class schedule subject to negotiation with our teachers union, whether it's hybrid or fully remote?
So Peter, that definitely still has to be worked out with the DTA, but, you know, one of my hopes is that we can get staff in the building teaching from their classrooms in either of those 2 models.
But in the hybrid model, that is going to be the case.
And the
So-
hybrid they'd be in anyway.
So I think parents need to understand what a material difference that is from our experience last spring. Every student, whether they're in person or remote, will be on a consistent schedule with mandatory assignments, with daily communication, in person, synchronous or remote synchronous. That's just a material change from where we were last spring.
Yeah.
But I just think it's important for people not to be in kind of fantasy land about full in person as an alternative. It's just not. It's not something we could even contemplate. So I think the two choices we really have over the coming weeks are, do we go fully remote or do we start with a hybrid and see how it goes?
Right.
But I think it's important to have people just recognize state guidance really precludes us from having 3,500 people in our 5 buildings in the next month. It's just not realistic.
This is Shannon. I just wanted to circle back to what Julia said. That synchronized with something that came up during the medical roundtable, is that we all have to be realistic. The virus will end up in the school. I think that's something that people really need to understand and acknowledge, and that it's a real risk. I mean, I think the school has done a tremendous job with this model, and I think you're minimizing risk. And John, you said at the beginning, we can't get to zero risk. And I think the thing that I just keep thinking about is there's so much unknown about this virus still. There's so much unknown about how it impacts children, how they spread it. And we're not just talking about the kids, we're talking about the teachers, so we've mentioned that a few times, staff. We're also talking about our broader community. If we have an outbreak in the schools and we have asymptomatic people out in our community not knowing they're sick, this is not just a Duxbury school issue. This becomes a Duxbury community issue. And that's an important thing for me, that we need to keep that in mind as well.
I have another question, and I know I harp a lot on the virtual instruction and the fidelity of the virtual instruction, but something that I've been hearing out on the street a little bit, so it's caused me to do my own homework and do some research. I haven't been able to find anything on it in any of the surrounding districts, but I've been hearing from some people that there are some districts around this part of Massachusetts that have started to explore or even purchased a virtual instruction solution that comes ready-made with virtual teachers who, ostensibly have been doing this for decades. We're seeing it not just with public education, but if you turn on the TV or whatever, you see like commercials like, distance learning is new to a lot of us, but we've been doing it for 30 years or whatever. So I just didn't know if John or Danielle or anyone had seen any of the surrounding districts look into that, or have they made any sort of purchase that, sort of is reflective of this, online learning solution that comes with online teachers who are steeped in virtual instruction. And can you guys comment on that?
Yeah, Danielle, because you were on that webinar yesterday, you want to talk about this?
Yeah.
By the way, this just got announced yesterday, so yeah.
So the state's been talking all summer about partnering with some of those companies that have been doing virtual learning for years. We have a couple in the state, which is Greenfield Virtual Academy and TECA. And so we finally received the information about their negotiation, about the programs that they are supporting that are most in line with the Massachusetts curriculum standards. And they shared the information. And so there's different options. Some of them, we were expecting them to be really negotiated down to a very reasonable price for school districts, because I'm anticipating that many school districts won't be able to do a Cohort C option the way we're offering, and they may need to rely on those virtual platforms a lot more heavily. But they're extremely expensive. I'm looking at it right now. It's got $200,000 price tags on it to be able to have a remote teacher available. And we heard loud and clear from our Duxbury families that their preference, if possible, would be able to have their students' remote learning supported by a Duxbury teacher. And so we're trying really hard to accommodate that to the extent possible. But there's a few platforms that the state shared that they are recommending. Edgenuity is one. Matt, you've probably heard of that one. And then Florida, FLVS Global. So that's a Florida Virtual Academy program. So those are the two programs that come with adult teacher support. And some of them have special education staff support as well. when they were talking on the call yesterday, I could not imagine how they would be able to support the volume of students that they may be facing this year. One of them said they have 10 staff, 10 special education staff, and I was thinking 10.
Yeah.
You need a lot more than 10. The other choices beyond the Edgenuity and FLDS Global were GCVS, and that's that Greenfield Commonwealth Virtual School, and TECA, which are local options. And these do not come with teacher support with the program. They'd be able to give us the course content that's already been developed and established for a fully virtual environment. It includes student checks and video and different ways of interacting. And we would have to have Duxbury staff assisting students with that coursework. I mentioned that we have PEAK, P-E-A-K, and that's a program that we've used in district with great success for students who may need a virtual option in the past. And so we may continue to use the more familiar program that we have that has a per student course cost and have our Duxbury teachers support as necessary. Again, we need to know the numbers, especially at the secondary level, to see how many students might need this fully virtual course option. So I can share with you more detail about it.
No, that's okay. I was just but you guys don't know if Plymouth or Pembroke or Situate or Quest are doing anything like that.
We don't know yet, Matt. Again, they just released it yesterday. I think people are certainly entertaining it, but I want to say in case you missed what Danielle just said, we get some pretty strong feedback from people that a fully third-party option wasn't necessarily the best situation. I think it has a place, actually, myself, but we need to have a conversation about that because, I just think their expectations are a little unreasonable about, fully remote if they choose to stay remote when everybody else is in school. So worth a conversation for sure.
Right. Okay. Thanks.
Yeah. I just want to, I'm having a little hard time with the Facebook Live questions, but I just do want to answer a couple. Someone just did ask, if you don't mind me jumping in here for a second, will a child's IEP be revoked if they choose to stay home? And that answers a definitive no. Children will get their special education services regardless of whether that they're in school or out of school. And someone asked about band, orchestra, and chorus, and what I'll say about band, orchestra, and chorus and music in general is that the state guidelines restrictions about those make it really complicated. And for chorus and band in particular, at the start of the school year, both need to be outside with 10 feet social distancing. So band and chorus cannot be inside to start the school year under any circumstance, at least if they're playing their instruments, right? So we can certainly be doing a different type of instruction, but if they're using the instruments or if they're singing, it needs to be outside 10 feet social distance. Orchestra, strings can be inside with appropriate social distancing. But someone asked about that. I thought that was kind of interesting. I just want to bring that up. Jim, did I say that right?
That's absolutely correct.
Thanks.
So I wanted to say how terrific it is that you guys have the extra week that the commissioner gave schools following Labor Day, putting back the extra 10 days of school that he took out of the required school year in order for districts to be able to engage in professional development for their staff. Because of your forward thinking, we had already organized professional development prior to Labor Day. And so that has enabled the building principals to put in place what I think are some terrific orientation schedules for the week following Labor Day. And I think that that's so important for children to have who want to, families who are prepared to let their children come to school, to have an in-person kind of orientation to the building, to their teacher, and to start the school year off in person. I think that that will make a huge difference compared to what happened in March, where we went fully remote, with almost kind of no preparation. And I think it will be of huge benefit to the hybrid model to have that orientation period and to get kids used to being back in school. So thank you for that.
Great. Thank you, Julia. I agree with you. I want to say too that we still are going to have some flexibility in our calendar because it's only a 170-day requirement now. We have, I believe, 7 days to, I don't know, play with is, I don't mean to describe it like that, but we're going to recommend to the committee that we kind of keep those days sort of in our back pocket. And we may need to inject more professional development days into the calendar, or we could choose to just get out 7 days earlier at the end of the year. But because of that and because of what we had done up front, we actually have a lot of flexibility, which we're grateful for. What else?
John, I know this is something that you guys are still working through, so feel free to say you're not ready to answer this right now, but any further thoughts on changes to the sick policy, for example? You know, it used to be that if your child had a fever, they could come back 24 hours after the fever ended. This is probably a, tricky one, but I think it's something that we all need to think about and parents need to be aware of, that there's probably going to be some kind of change there.
Yeah, I mean, so it's tricky because so many symptoms. Well, let me back up and say, we're going to basically have parents sign off at the beginning of the year that their child's attendance at school, how do I say this? Attest to the fact that they have checked their child on any given day for, X, Y, Z symptoms, right? So we need parents to be super vigilant about checking for COVID-related symptoms every single day. And if they send the child to school, that's effectively that they've signed off. But what I want to say, though, about what your question is, a symptom of a common cold is also the symptom of of COVID-19. And so our protocols are going to be pretty strict around, if you're exhibiting symptoms of COVID-19, here's the expectation, and it's quarantine, negative test, et cetera, et cetera. So we're putting the final touches on that document. It's 19 pages of protocols, but you're 100% right. We will be strict. We have to be strict. The regulations are strict, and so unfortunately, there's gonna be a lot of we're gonna have to react a lot to things that might just be the common cold or might be just, kind of a random virus.
John, if I could just add, we've had staff in buildings over the summer, and if anyone we've already kind of been practicing that this summer. If we've had a staff member that had any kind of symptom that was COVID, similar to COVID, we've had them immediately switch to fully remote until they either had a negative test or if they've been self-quarantining for 14 days. We have a number of questions in the chat, John, about just specific information about what the protocols are. And I think that is the reason that we're really trying to get that district plan out as soon as possible. It was due August 10th and the state did extend it, but our hope is to be able to share that with families sooner than later so that you can see there's scenarios that our nursing staff is with the support of Pat Dillon, who's on this call, are creating Duxbury specific protocols of if there is someone who was exposed, we will notify anyone that was potentially exposed through a letter immediately, and we'd be giving recommendations about how to either quarantine or get tested. And so I think we're prepared with those now so that if we do have a case in the fall, we're able to not be writing the letter the day that we have a situation coming up. And so we do have if-then scenarios in our remote our district plan that we're creating that families would be able to see clearly if somebody was potentially exposed at home, steps to take, if a student had symptoms or an adult had symptoms at school, what steps the teacher and the staff would take. And we're going to be working closely this fall with the nursing staff in our district as well as the town medical community to be able to make decisions on the fly when these things come up. So I think families will be clear with what the procedures and protocols are in the next few days.
And if there are any changes that need to be made to school committee policies, for example, MASC came out with a mask policy yesterday that it was recommending that school committees adopt. So if, as Shannon mentioned, there's a sick policy or any other policies where you feel we need to have a review and revision, let's make sure that we have school committee meetings in place prior to school opening so that we can provide those for you.
Just a couple other Facebook questions. Will children have to use Zoom? The answer is yes. It is a platform of choice, and students will have to access it. Someone asked too, just in general, about do we have staff they think that might not return to school, due to COVID-related concerns. And I can't speak to specifics due to confidentiality issues, but the answer is absolutely, yeah. I mean, we will have staff that choose to not return to the classroom, or at least return in person to the classroom. That's something we have to work with, and we're working with them to accommodate their rights to do so. And I think that's it for Facebook. That's an actual question. And yeah, anything else?
Do you want to open up to people who might be on Zoom who want to raise their hand?
Well, I was going to do that, Julia. I'm just waiting to make sure everyone's done with their questions. So does anybody else have questions on the presentation? We're good? Okay, yeah, so Shannon, you good? Yes? Okay, so we do have time for public comment. And the general rule is try to keep it under 2 minutes or under, and refrain from airing any grievances about school committee personnel or school personnel. And I just want to say that as a parent myself of a middle schooler and a high schooler, I fully understand that every single parent wants the absolute best for his or her child. And we respect all of your opinions. And we just ask that, as John said, everyone recognizes the perspective that we are in a national pandemic, and there's no way we can make everyone happy, and we're just going to try to do the best that we can. So we would love to hear from you. If you could please use the raise your hand feature, Dr. Antonucci can manage that.
Kelly, could I just have a quick comment beforehand?
Yes.
Yeah, I'd also like to just add, we're also in a financial crisis. At our town meeting on Saturday, the town approved a $390,000 reduction to the tentative budget, which was planned in March. So I think, we're operating in an incredibly challenged environment. As people who know me, I've talked about for years that I believe our schools are under-resourced. But what I wanted to say is I wanted to thank every parent who attended town meeting. It was very gratifying to see. There was enormous turnout. The town is very averse to spending free cash and/or stabilization funds. There was some discussion on the point, but it was incredibly warming and gratifying. And I think a credit to our administrators and our faculty and our families. When it came to a vote to minimize the damage to the school budget, the alternative was over $1 million budget cut, which would have resulted in the layoff of 25 teachers. The $390,000 was the lesser of two evils. The vote was unanimous at town meeting to use stabilization funds and free cash. I'm not a fan of the sport of town meeting, but there's always a minority opposition to every article. I've never seen a unanimous vote and there was outstanding turnout. So all of you that attended town meeting for the first time, or encouraged other people to attend town meeting if you weren't able to last Saturday, it's really, John was very gratified, Katie, Danielle. It was a great showing from the community, but you also have to recognize, we're $390,000 below where we thought we were going to be in March, which was really not a good situation. So this is going to be rough. We're operating in a fiscal crisis as well. It's not going to turn around quickly. We need your support, and we really need your advocacy to help make sure the school has the proper resources to get the job done. But thank you to everyone who attended town meeting, and thank you to the town for supporting as best able the schools for this year to help manage through this.
Good point. Thank you.
Before we go into Q&A, I'm going to answer a couple more if you don't mind. Someone weighed in on Facebook. I think I may have missed the kindergarten discussion. Our kindergarten is following a full day schedule as half day an option. Kindergartens will be on following a full day schedule. Half day is still an option. And although it needs to be discussed further by the school committee, we are recommending reducing the fee for full day kindergarten from $4,000 to $1,600 this year, just to acknowledge that the program is going to feel a little different this year, even though it is technically a full day model. I also want to say someone in our Q&A is asking about, what are we going to do as schools, to help kind of working parents who historically relied on 5 days of full in-person instruction. And I don't know how to say this, but it's not something that we can help resolve for families. We can't. I hope there's some community groups that step up and try to provide daycare, childcare services, but that's not something I don't even want to pretend that we could delve into that. It's just not. I certainly empathize. I have a family myself, and I've been through it, but it's not something that we have a solution for at the school level. Going to open it up to Q&A. The first one is Nancy Day. Mrs. Day. Can you unmute?
Yes, hi. I think I might have raised my hand by accident,
Oh.
so my apologies.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry about that.
Okay, Allison Joyce. Allison? Allison, can you hear us? Can you unmute? I'm going to put Allison back, and I will try to get her.
Just a quick comment on the unmuting, in case you don't know, because sometimes we're really new to Zoom. When you get called on, just mouse over your name, and you should see a blue box or something come up. Just make sure you just hit unmute, and that'll unmute you right away.
Okay, Carly Wee.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can.
Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you,
Hi.
Carly.
Thanks for the presentation. Sorry?
You cut out a little bit, but go ahead.
Oh, hi. Well, I was wondering what is happening with the orchestra program, and if you already answered this, I apologize. I wasn't able to hear the whole presentation, but what's the plan for that, and also the band? And one of my friends wants to know about the Disney trip, if there have been any decisions on that.
I can jump in, John.
Yeah, why don't you jump in on the orchestra? Yep. And
So
band.
there is guidance in the guidance that DESE released about music and visual and performing arts courses. Orchestra is allowed to rehearse inside the building. They have to maintain social distancing expectations, and the students have to wear masks while rehearsing, but they are allowed under the guidance. Because band and chorus are obviously wind instruments, they have to rehearse outside of the building. And so we are in the process of getting some large tents to set up around the campus, and where students will be able to rehearse adjacent to the buildings. to maintain the continuity of the programs as best as possible. And the Disney trip obviously is something that has been on our radar all summer. We are waiting until school begins and all of our teachers are back, and then we'll communicate with families and with the school committee about the next steps.
Thanks, Jim. It's highly unlikely that we're going to run the Disney trip this year. I just want to be honest with families. I can't envision a scenario where travel of that with that larger group is a possibility during this school year. I hope I'm wrong. Paul Hussey. Paul? Hi, Paul, can you hear us? I'll try to get you back in a bit. Edith Barnes. Edith?
Hi, I just had a quick questions about after-school activities like sports and clubs. I know that some of that's still up in the air, but I didn't know if you'd made decisions about things like yearbook and robotics. Have you made any kind of decision along after-school lines?
Thank you. Let me answer the sports question first. We are waiting. That's going to be dictated by the state. We expect to hear a little more from them in the next week or two. I will say, actually, there's some reason for I'm hearing some optimism around some sports coming back in a modified way. Maybe not all sports, but time's going to tell on that. Mr. Donovan, can you speak to extracurriculars if we have any thoughts on that at this point?
Absolutely. You know, at the high school, we are evaluating our co-curriculars. It will depend a little bit on guidance. It also will depend upon what our cleaning protocols become at the end of the day and whether or not we're able to have groups into the building, you know, until 7 or 8 o'clock at night, as we normally have. So at the moment, athletics are scheduled to begin in mid-September. And with the exception of Student Council and NHS, which have been meeting virtually throughout the summer, none of our co-curriculars are underway yet. So we will evaluate the kind of viability of some of our co-curriculars. I'll use like the musical as an example. That's something that's pretty much going to be impossible for us to run given the guidance for performing venues and, you know, social distancing, the fact that you can't play or sing inside. So we have some of those limitations that we're going to have to work under. And so we'll have a lot more information as we get closer to the start of school.
Thank you, Mr. Donovan. Just a couple things that I can hit quick on the chat. Someone asked if school committee is going to be voting today, and the answer is yes. That is on the agenda, unless Ms. President has a different answer. And there was one other. Someone must have come in late, but when are they going to be notified of what cohort student is placed in? Those should be going out first thing next week, early next week, hopefully Monday. I'm going to try Mr. Hussey again. Hi, Paul. Mr. Hussey, we can't hear you for some reason. It doesn't look like you're muted, but we cannot hear you. Next is just Lindsay is the name.
Hi, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
We can.
Hi, yes, thank you. I just have a quick question. It was mentioned earlier briefly that when you were talking about other districts, that there's an option to break off the schools to vote to open for full-time in person per se, and the others be a hybrid model if you were to approve. So for example, where you mentioned that Chandler, the preschool, will be going back full-time 4 days, would it be an option to vote for Chandler to be full-time as well?
Thank you for the question. Technically, yes, it is an option. We are not recommending that. But yes, technically that could be an option.
And just to say, the reason the preschool's going back in person fully is because the numbers are able to be accommodated with small groups without modifying it. So they aren't doing that for any other reason except that numbers are appropriate.
Yeah, Danielle, the preschool too is half days as well,
Right.
with as Danielle said, much smaller class sizes. So thank you for the question. Mike McGee. Oh. Hi, Mike. Sorry about that. Are you there?
Oh, I got you. Can you hear me now?
We can.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Antonucci, and thank you, school committee members. I am a lawyer. I'm also a father of a 4- and a 6-year-old, both daughters, and I'm also the husband of a lawyer. And this has been an incredibly challenging and difficult road since March 13th. And I can say that I could say that the hybrid model is going to be very challenging for my family and for other similar families. But I would recommend to the committee to vote for the hybrid model for nothing more than getting our families through the doors. This has been incredibly emotional. We haven't put our kids in these schools in many, many months. And we need to do that as a community. And I would encourage you to vote for it tonight. I'd also encourage you to hold that line over these next few weeks because we need that as a community. And I want to thank you all for your hard work in keeping our families and our teachers safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Shannon Godden. Hi, Shannon.
Hi. Thanks again to all of you for what must be an incredibly challenging effort. My question is particularly for the high school students, in my case, if we have questions about the impact on our students' schedules or other questions, if we're considering Cohort C, to whom should we reach out at the high school?
I'll take that. Are you talking about after, if I can ask a question of you, talking about after you decide or in making that decision?
I need to put her back, Jim.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry about that. Shannon, sorry I disabled you and you're back.
It's okay. In the process of making the decision.
I would ask that you send me an email and we will connect.
Sounds good. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thanks,
I
Shannon.
would say, Jim, though, I would like to add if parents could wait until the cohort decision has gone out before they ask that, because I don't think that this high school staff is going to be able to go through student schedule scenarios before the cohort email goes out. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah, we should finish that hopefully tomorrow, and then we'll be able to go into build mode. So our student schedules actually, as of this moment, have not been entirely built yet.
Couple of things before I go on to the next person, just in the chat. Someone asked a question about the high needs option. So Danielle talked about this for those who could come to school 4 days a week. Are students on IEPs considered for this? Can parents send their feedback on this option prior to decision making? What I would say is, please reach out to the special ed department if you have a question, but there's very specific criteria that are going to be used to identify the high need students, which Dr. Klingeman reviewed during the presentation. So I can't answer the question specifically about a particular student, but there are very specific criteria laid out by state guidelines that'll help us identify those high need students. It is not everybody on an IEP, but I appreciate the clarifying question. Question 2 about cleaning protocols, air filtration systems. I know Brian Cherry's on the call, but I'll try to answer it. Great question. Air quality, HVAC is of a great concern to us as we can consider how to slow down the transmission of the virus. We are working with a private engineering firm to evaluate our HVAC system. as well as working with a biologist to do air quality testing. So we'll have benchmark testing done before school starts, and then be able to evaluate it as the year goes on. So we are taking it very seriously, and I guess I would say we're not opening our buildings if our HVAC systems aren't safe. So we're taking it, doing everything we can in our power to ensure that we meet all the safety standards. We also, when we release the full plan next week to the community, you'll see our our cleaning protocol. We are really ramping up our cleaning and disinfecting protocol, and we'll have it laid out about how many times a day bathrooms will be cleaned, how often high-touch surfaces like doorknobs, rails, desks will be cleaned. So we're going all in, again, we're taking it as seriously as we can. Thank you for that question. Next question, Megan Greenstein.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can.
Great, thank you. So I appreciate everyone's work on getting this accomplished. My concern has simply been the ability to stay in this model, right? Like, I recently had an experience where I had to get tested, and it was such a painful experience in trying to get a rapid test. And the testing is really backlogged in Massachusetts. So most of the places told me it was 2 to 14 days response time. So we opted to spend 7.5 hours in the sun waiting in multiple lines to get the rapid 15-minute test. That just happened this week. And so when I was sitting there that day, I sort of felt like, oh my God, this is what we're all going to be up against the first time a child comes to school with coronavirus. And now a cohort of 50 kids has to go either wait the 14-day quarantine period and or also get a test such that they don't expose their family members if they have contracted it. I just feel it gets really messy really quickly. So my ultimate question was, if you were able to just abandon this kind of try to get everybody in the school, everybody at once, if that was something you just right now said, we aren't going to do, we're just going to go completely virtual, do you think the virtual online platform that you would then provide if you had 4 more weeks to focus on that would be better than the one you're going to be providing now because you have more time to do it? Or would we be left with the same system?
That's a great question and a great point too about the complications about the testing and stuff. The short answer is no, I don't think it'd be any different. We were obligated and we've been working on this all summer to produce 3 different plans, knowing full well that at any time throughout the school year, we might end up in one or the other. So all the work we're doing this summer with our faculty and staff and our curriculum team, we are developing a remote plan that I think is robust as it's going to be regardless of the situation that we start the school year in. That's what I would say on that. In regards to the testing, by the way, I do think it's a real issue. And we talked to, we had this medical roundtable. I talked about it earlier. I don't have much to say about that, but it's going to be really messy until they can get test results. Kind of more testing and quicker results back. There's going to be a lot of people left in limbo all throughout the year. So yeah, it's messy. I wish I had a solution for that. It's obviously out of our hands, but it's certainly going to complicate the ability for us to kind of have some continuity in the classrooms. I'm sorry, Julie, if I interrupted.
So I was just going to harp on that issue. It seems to me that some high-level thinking at the state should involve how to provide testing for families with children who are going back to school either in a hybrid or fully in-person learning model, because as Megan pointed out, it's if you don't have easy access to testing, the delay to the child's education is extended by potentially weeks.
Yeah, I wish, yeah, I agree with you. I wish there was better support from the state. Nicole Lang, I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name.
No, that's fine. First of all, I just wanted to say thank you. I feel like at least going into this unknown. You guys have definitely done your research, and it feels like you're keeping all the steps you can. And secondly, I want to ask, what would happen if a family was to choose one child going in for the hybrid while another child wanted to be on the cohort C option?
Just let me see if I understand. I'm sorry, I don't have time hearing you. Are you saying will you have the choice as a parent to send one of your children to hybrid and one to remote?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you would have that choice
Okay.
as a family.
And then my other question, I'm sorry, is just that we're talking about preschool going back to their full 4 days. Is that the integrated preschool as well?
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you so much for everything you guys have done. It's very comforting to know that you're working so hard for us.
We appreciate that. Thank you very much. Iana Stewart is next.
Hi, it's Alana. Can you hear
I
me?
apologize. Thank you. Yes, I can.
That's okay. So first of all, thank you for all of your efforts. It's obviously been very challenging for you. And I have a comment and a question. And my perspective is coming from that of a parent of a high schooler. I also, like a previous participant, would like to urge you to vote for the hybrid model. I think it's crucial to our children's psychological health that they are able to connect with their new teachers this year and have some type of an interaction with their peers, even at a safe distance with a mask on. My question, however, is if you were to choose the full remote learning model, would you allow high school students to adjust their course selections in August? For instance, if they chose very challenging AP courses or science courses that were mostly lab-based and they didn't feel that they could be successful at home with those courses.
Jim?
It's a great question. So I believe the answer is going to be yes, right? We expect that in a full remote environment, if someone chooses to go, if someone chooses to take the cohort C option, that there will be a discussion about their previous course selection and then the opportunities and implication of those opportunities for the upcoming school year. So I think the short answer is yes. We're targeting right now an early September release of schedules for all high school students, and our guidance counselors will be back at that time, and we'll be able to go through and manage all those changes.
Thanks, Jim. Next one is just says Brian. Brian?
Hi, I'm actually on my husband's computer. This is Peyton Conley. And again, as everyone has said, thank you very much for your hard work. And I just want to be crystal clear, and I'm sorry to harp on the issue, but I have a lot of Chandler parents asking me if they cannot homeschool their children this year or forever, how long it takes, should they expect that their child will essentially fail the year and be expected to repeat that year?
Don, I can
respond
to that. I think that if there's families at Chandler that feel as though they have really extraordinary circumstances that they aren't going to be able to manage any type of remote learning situation this year, I would just ask that you reach out to Erin and to me so that Erin and I can discuss with you options that you might have and perhaps help make a plan for your family. We are certainly not hoping for students to need to be held back or missing a year of instruction because we've created such a difficult situation for families. But I think that we've shown, if anyone's reached out to us already, that we can be flexible and we can help with support or suggestions for you so that you don't have to make a tough decision like that. So reach out to us and we can talk one-on-one.
Before I call on the next person, just a couple things I want to grab from the chat. Question is if you have children in two different schools, will they be in the same cohort? And the answer is families will remain in the same cohort, right? So I think that's all I need to say about that. And then someone asked a kind of procedural question after the school committee votes. When will the Duxbury Teachers Association vote? I don't know the exact answer on that. So and when will the final decision be released? I expect that maybe it will get resolved in the next two to 3 weeks, probably 2 weeks at most. I'll come back to that if I get a different answer in the next few minutes. Deidre Weiler.
Good afternoon, folks. Thanks for taking my comment. So I have a question I'd like to touch upon your last statement, Dr. Antonucci, about the DTA. That, and just by way of a little bit of background, I too, like Mr. McGee, am an attorney, so I like to think of worst case scenario. Unfortunately, that's what I'm educated to do. So here goes my question. Let's assume that your recommendation, which I think is a good one, is that we go to a hybrid model, and we assume that the school committee accepts that recommendation and approves that this evening. What happens if we do wait that 2 to 3 weeks for the DTA vote and they do not accept it? Have we been sitting on our hands for 3 weeks to assume that now we're going completely remote? And frankly, I think that when you compare the hybrid model to the complete remote model, they're not necessarily the same. Ms. Greenstein's comment or question to you folks about what the difference is, you had indicated there's not much difference. I would suggest there should be a difference between a hybrid and a fully remote model. And I would hope, and my question is what kind of planning is being put into place today, this afternoon, to ensure that we're not sitting here 3 weeks from now saying, oh shucks.
Good question. Actually, Ms. Greenstein's question was actually about whether we would have built a different remote model if our recommendation was to go to a full remote model to start off the year. And what I said is still accurate, is which we were charged with building 3 models: in-person, hybrid, and remote. So we have a fuller remote model built, knowing that at some point in time it's possible, if not likely, that we'll end up in that model. So I think that was a question. And honestly, I'm not going to engage in a hypothetical. What I can say about our DTA is that we have been working in very, very close collaboration with them the entire summer and spring. And we're typically, typically on the same page. I'm very optimistic, actually, that we're going to land on the same page. But to answer your question directly, if they choose to vote against it, they vote against it. And we have a remote model that will be built and hopefully accepted by the state, and we would roll that out. I don't expect that to happen, but I guess if you want me to engage in the hypothetical, which I said I wasn't going to do, yeah, that could very well happen. But I don't expect it to happen here in Duxbury. Alexandra Tarzia? Sorry if I mispronounced your name.
No, that's quite all right. And this is actually Joe Tarzia, her husband. Sorry about that. We have been tagging in. We're both working parents. And first and foremost, thank you all for everything you're doing in this very difficult and challenging time. We really do appreciate it. Just a couple questions from my end. I'm not sure if it's come up before, but will there be any preemptive or precautionary testing of the students at any of the schools? And is there any thought to, or was there any discussion around a potential closure plan when, or if there is a second wave or a high infection rate in either the community or the school? At what point would we go full remote again?
Thank you. Let me take both those. In regards to us, the schools doing testing, the answer is no. We just don't have the capacity, and it's really not something that we could do as a school department. But it's a good question. Secondly, we did talk about this earlier about is there what would trigger us to go remote, and we had said earlier, and it sounds like you may have missed it, that we are waiting. Hopefully, we're going to get some metrics from the state soon that'll at least act as a guidepost for us in local communities when we're making decisions to either flip to remote or maybe alternatively flip to it all in person. But at this point, I wish I had a better answer, but we just don't know. So we're hopeful to get that data soon, and we'll have to kind of figure out how to use that moving forward. But that's going to be one of the most challenging things I think the communities are going to have to undertake, is to figure out when is the right moment to make a transition from one model to the other. So I wish I had a better answer for you. I'm going to actually pause for a moment and bring our DTA president, Matt Files, in, because I probably gave some incomplete answers, but I can't find him. Matt, are you just I can't find your username here. Can you text me?
There's a Matt.
I saw
He just
Matt.
popped back up. DTA president just
Oh, hey,
popped
there he
back
is.
up.
Look at that. He Matt, sorry, I was looking for Matt Files. Sorry about that.
I'm here now. Am I here?
You are. Sorry about that.
No, I can just, you weren't incorrect, John. I just want to kind of clarify some of the timeline things and to Ms. Weiler's question, what happens when we vote. And so our bylaws require an MOA, an agreement that is on top of our existing contract to be in the hands of our membership 10 days prior to a vote. And so, working backwards from the start of school, in order to vote before the start of school, we would need an agreement to be ironed out somewhere between the 17th and the 20th. And so the next couple of weeks, as Dr. Antonucci said, we've entered negotiations. And so it really comes down to when the plan is finalized, when we can reach an agreement that we're both happy with, and we can present that to our membership. So I hope that answers that part. If there is a no vote, all that it means is that we continue working under our existing contract. Because, like I said, the agreement is on top of our existing contract. It's not a new contract, it's additional language to our contract. So I hope that makes clear both of those situations.
Thanks, Matt. I appreciate you jumping in. Okay, we just have a couple more. I'm losing track. Did we call in Nate Marconi? Nate Marconi?
Hi, this is actually Jessica Marconi. I was just looking for further clarification on Cohort C for the Chandler School. What would the middle of the day look like? Will there be assigned teachers giving live instruction during that time at all? And will there be pre-recorded lessons for those kids from either their classroom teacher or the remote teachers?
You want me to take that one?
Please.
Go ahead, Erin.
So, so for Cohort C for Chandler, and actually the same would be true for Alden, we would be looking to hire a separate teacher that would manage the Cohort C students, meaning that they would still be part of their regularly assigned class. They would attend morning meeting and afternoon meeting with their regular class. And then during the school day, while the other kids are in person and their classroom teacher is teaching those kids, they would participate in small group and whole group instruction with the Cohort C teacher. Likely that person would be teaching all 3 grade levels, so it would be a schedule for those students, and that person would be managing assignments.
Erin, is it safe to say that the remote teacher would be doing a similar model that we would be doing in remote, where we'd be operating under like 2 ELA sessions a week, 2 math sessions?
Exactly. Yeah. So it would be 2 small group math groups per week and 2 small group doses of reading instruction per week on top of the regular lessons. There would be a variety of both pre-recorded lessons and live lessons for those students too.
Thank you. I also I want to go back. We were talking about what could trigger a switch to remote, and Brian Cherry, our facilities director, is on this call, and these are the kind of things we're dealing with. But you mentioned these are the kind of variables that evidence of the world we're living in, but, the supply chain's been an issue for things like disinfectants and cleaning supplies and a whole host of other cleaning products. And, that's just one thing also that is a variable that we need to consider. It could be the middle of the year, we can't get disinfecting supplies anymore, depending on what's happening around the country. So I just thought it was an interesting point he made. And I just wanted to kind of bring that up, that this is a puzzle and we're dealing with things that we've never had to deal with, before, kind of in our lifetime. Last hand raised for now is Jen Mazer. Jen?
Hey, Dr. Antonucci, it's Brian Mazer, Jen's husband. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Good. Thank you. Had just a kind of a clarifying question, because I'm somewhat confused. When it comes to your negotiations with the Teachers Association, have you opened up the contract, or are you guys simply impact bargaining over returning to work and the safety of the workplace upon the return of the teachers to work?
It's a good question. Impact bargaining, Brian.
Okay. All right. So, I just want to comment on something you said then at the outset of the meeting this afternoon. And I say this, not only as a parent of 3 students in the district, but also as, a public sector labor and employment attorney for the past 20 years. And I think it's important for the hundreds of parents who have taken the time out of their day to listen to this meeting to get an accurate understanding of what the law really calls for here relative to the department's bargaining obligations with the association. And first, let me just say, and give me the opportunity to commend the department and yourself for what you described as a good working relationship with the association. Not all districts can say that they have that relationship, and it's a reflection, in my opinion, of your ability to work together, which again should be commended. That being said, however, you mentioned, I think, that everything relative to a return to school model is tentative pending impact bargaining negotiations with the association, and ultimately you're reaching an agreement with them. And I think it's important for you and the department to be clear to the parents that the department's legal obligation is to bargain to either agreement or impasse with the association relative to a return to school. While I understand a full agreement is always the goal, and an agreement is not legally required, your legal obligations are to meet and confer in good faith to resolution or impasse, and if impasse is reached, the department can implement its last best offer to the association. And while I, for one, hope that you are able to reach an agreement with the association, I think I speak for many parents who want to see their kids in school as much as possible. And that if an agreement cannot be reached, the department implements a return to school model that addresses the needs and wants of the students and the parents of the district and doesn't capitulate to the association, and that we see it at a minimum, a hybrid model on the first day of school. Thank you.
Appreciate your input. Matt's back. Matt?
Yeah, I can just, a couple of things. Our membership is made up of lifelong educators, and our commitment is to the students. It's a commitment to their education. So I just want to put that out there first. But I don't want to get into the weeds of what we do when we negotiate, because the platform is not right for that. What happens, and what I alluded to earlier, is that we're voting on additional working condition language that goes on top of our contract. Whatever happens at a ratification meeting does not affect what the district does going forward. We continue to work under the existing contract. We are negotiating the working conditions of our professional staff. If we reach an impasse, school still opens. We still move forward. And I just want to make that abundantly clear. Thanks, John.
Thank you, Matt. Appreciate that. Okay, that's it for questions at this point. I'm going to turn it back over to the committee.
Okay, so I'm assuming that folks might want to make a statement before we vote. And I'll open it up by saying One thing I always tell people and that I've taught my kids is you make a decision today with the best information that you have and that you've explored all your resources, and it's going to be the best decision that you can make at the time. As far as the one thing that I thought was important, or one of the things, there are myriad important, but I wanted to find out our Duxbury numbers, because the MTA has said, well, if a district has, 5% is a magic number or less, safe to return to school. Duxbury has a population of 16,502 people. We have had a total of 151 COVID cases, which is 0.92% of the population. We're less than 1%. So when we're talking about bringing our kids back into the building a couple days a week, that is the population who's coming back in the building. As long as families can be responsible and not change our Duxbury pool of COVIDity, then I think that we should be pretty okay. That's my opinion. I think that we have come up with two really fair options. So we're accommodating parents who would like to see their students in the building, and we are accommodating parents who are, for health reasons or any other reason, do not want to have students in the building. So we've made two really good options with the hybrid model and then the Cohort C, which is remote learning. And then I just wanted to say anecdotally, I have reached out to some teacher friends here and in other districts, and teachers really don't like to have to teach students who they have never met. So any and all FaceTime is better, and we all know it's better for the students' social emotional well-being to have some FaceTime with adults in the classroom with their peers to maintain some emotional health. So those are my 4 cents, I think, and I'd like to hear from other members.
Well, I can chime in. I think that I agree with the points that you're making. I think we also have to consider that our staff comes from a broader range than just Duxbury. So it isn't only looking at Duxbury's local rate, but Plymouth County itself, which represents, I think, rather a lot of our teachers and staff, is also in the mix. But the prioritizing FaceTime is very important to me, and because I believe that students, I think we all can agree that students learn best in an in-person classroom, and that, but our traditional in-person classroom's been taken off the table this year, pretty much. So I feel that the hybrid model offers the best kind of compromise under the conditions that we're operating. But one thing that struck me last week in our conversation was when Jim Donovan said that it was much easier to keep a student who became sick, to keep them synced up with their coursework if we were in a hybrid model than if we were in a fully remote model, or even in a fully in-person model. And so I feel that the hybrid model potentially offers us the greatest consistency over time. And that consistency is something that I've come to value quite a lot since March. And so for those reasons, I do support the hybrid model.
So I think I said it before, I think the administration and the teachers who've been working on these plans have done an amazing job. I think the hybrid is a very good model. I have to, I just think everything is unknown right now. I think things are changing. I think there's a lot of information out there that's starting to roll in as other schools open up. We don't live in a small country where we can lock down our borders, which is what places where schools have successfully opened are those types of countries. So I think this is a risk. We're never going to have a zero risk. I think the most important thing is that that families understand that, and that this is I'm sensing this is going to go hybrid. I'm going to vote for hybrid. I just can't in good conscience do that right now. So if we're going hybrid, this is a joint effort. Families have to take this seriously. I'm worried about the broader community. I'm worried about the teachers. I think the numbers are small for good reason. Massachusetts shut down early. People took it seriously. We're all in COVID fatigue right now. Trust me, I have 3 small kids at home. I work full time. This is hard. It sucks. So anyways, that's where I'm coming from. So.
Thanks, Shannon. Matt or Peter?
Yeah, I'd love to comment. And Shannon, that's, thank you, right? I mean, I think that perspective is very important because we all want some amount of normalcy. So the momentum is, push to return kids to school. We can feel it in the days are already starting to get a little shorter. This is a normal transition of the season. There's this enormous momentum that says, well, we got to get our kids back in school. So I think it's just great that you have that perspective, and I appreciate you voicing it. I think from the outset, our administration and our faculty, I think every single person that gets an education, they do it because they like being with our kids. They want to be in school. It's not great to not be in school for anyone involved. So I think everyone as a parent needs to just start with that. And Shannon, you called it teamwork. Start with, we're all coming from the same place. We all want our students to be back in school. Every single teacher, every staff member, every bus driver, every cafeteria worker, and every administrator. So that's a starting point. The second is the state asked us to do something we didn't have a choice about, which was to develop 3 very comprehensive plans. As a result, there are tons of details, and many parents have very legitimate questions, but they're at a level of detail that our administrators haven't had the opportunity to get to. So just give them a little bit of time, because it's all going to work out, but there's a lot of stuff that's going to have to be figured out. 62 of you have written questions during this meeting. A dozen of you or so have had a chance to ask questions. There's hundreds more that are going to have not the same questions, maybe slightly different. So just understand the 3 high-level plans. I think our teams have done a great job developing those. We're going to need all 3 perhaps, but there's a lot of detail. So just try and be a little bit patient and keep in mind we're all trying to do the same thing at the end of the day. My perspective on both kind of full in person as well as full remote, I think the state is going to weigh in very heavily about either of those 2 choices. In other words, there's either going to have to be very compelling and positive public health data that the state would support, not just one community, but a significant number of communities in the Commonwealth going back in person fully, or the converse is going to happen, which happened in March, which is the state ultimately is going to decide it's unsafe for the state to have public schools open. So I really think there's not as much discretion as it implies by us having developed 3 plans. I think we would be taking great risk to go fully in person. And I think if we chose to go fully remote, I think that choice may not be, we may not have that choice in the future because the state might tell us if the conditions dictate. The state's going to be focused on what are the conditions in the pandemic in the state. What's the projected conditions looking forward? We got to rely upon the state. We can't put together medical expertise to advise just Duxbury. We're going to have to rely upon them. So I think parents have to be flexible. They have to recognize we're trying to do the same thing. We want our kids to have as much positive in-person experience as possible. I just don't think we have as much discretion as it implies. And I'll support the hybrid model, but I think it's just very important parents to realize things could change between now and September 14th. And certainly they could change between September 14th and November 14th, and then again by February. So everyone just has to keep in mind, we're all trying to do the same thing. It's just we're not going to have as much discretion as it seems. So I think this vote that we're taking tonight, I agree with Shannon. There's really only two options. And I think one is worth a try. And I think we have to recognize that we're taking some risk and just see how it goes.
Thanks, Peter. Matt,
Kelly?
what you got for us?
Well, I think this is, I'm disappointed. This is an unenviable decision that we have to make. I'm going to support the hybrid model. I'm disappointed that we're in this position as a country because, quite frankly, I just feel like we've not had anything close to a national strategy since this pandemic hit. And so we're sort of forced into this situation, which I think is, I just think that it's incredibly disheartening. I agree with Peter that I think the real choices right now are if you look at fully in person or fully remote, either way, you're going to have, understandably, 50% of the community that's really, really disappointed, because if we go fully remote, there's psychological implications to that we don't need to go over. I think we all know what they are in terms of, sociability and stuff like that. If we mandate fully in person, then we're really, putting a statement out there that we're just going to go full steam ahead despite what the unknowns are around this virus, and we're putting people's health at risk. So I'm disappointed because I think the sort of the least of the three evils right now is to start with a hybrid, closely monitor it, see how it goes, and be able to turn on a dime and be agile. And so I'm really happy that the administration has put this much thought and effort and work and analysis into what our plan is for hybrid, because I feel confident that when someone gets infected, and someone will get infected, we'll be able to make some reasonably good decisions in short order. So all of that's to say is that I'm going to vote for the hybrid, but I'm going to do it reluctantly based on where we are as a country.
Well, I appreciate your honest, everyone's honest opinion and observations. And I agree. We as a country have been put in a really terrible position. And there's no really good answer. So we will do the best we can. And I want to, again, probably for the third week in a row, I don't know how many times we've met in a row, just really thank John, Danielle, Katie, all of the principals, the entire administrative team. You folks have worked unbelievably beyond expectations, or I don't even know how to say it. I mean, the work you've put in is phenomenal to come up with these three plans and to think of everything that you can within reason, and we will be throwing curveballs. So I just really, really want to say thank you again. It's pretty incredible the work that you all have done and given up a lot of your quote unquote free time in the summer. And I just want to say, there's been a lot in, I'm one of those crazy people who reads the comments when I read an article in the newspaper, and there's been a lot of insults to teachers. Oh, if we're going to go hybrid or we're going to go remote, then, teachers should be pink slipped. And let me make it perfectly clear, remote learning for teachers is probably more work. And they're home with their own families and their young children. So this is not easy for anyone. And schools are asked to do a lot nowadays. And we are not a Boston school or a Holyoke or a Springfield school, but we have our own reality here in Duxbury. And we understand that different families have different needs. And we try as hard as we can to meet everyone's needs. And I just really applaud the administration for all the work that they've done. That being said, I would like to entertain a motion to accept our back to school hybrid learning plan.
So moved.
A second.
Thank you. All right, all in favor, we will do roll call. Julia?
Aye.
Shannon?
Nay.
Matt?
Aye.
Peter?
Aye.
Kelly? Aye. So the motion passes 4-1. Providing nothing is happening now in the next 4 weeks. Looks like our kids will resume school in a hybrid model, a well thought out and well planned hybrid model. Okay. I think we've done public comment. So is there anything anybody else would like to cover?
Do we need another meeting?
Don't have one set yet, so John and I can talk about that.
Yeah, we probably will soon. Yeah.
Yeah, and we are going to need one to the mask policy that I believe, Julia, you brought up, that came out the other day. We also have a new harassment policy from Mass Association of School Committees. We are going to have a couple of things that are policy changes that we will need to vote on. So we'll let you know as soon as we pick a date.
Great,
Okay,
thank you.
can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Julia?
Aye.
Shannon?
Aye.
Matt?
Aye.
Peter?
Aye.
Kelly? Aye. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Aye.
Thank you.
Did you?